And in a time where debt is prevalent for many Canadians, we're addressing why it's important to open up the conversation to financial well-being. The Vice President of Marketing at Bromwich+Smith, Jasmine Marra, joins us this morning to discuss this. Good morning.
Good morning, Andrea.
Thank you so much for joining us. So as a society, we've really started to open up that conversation when it comes to financial well-being. Personally, why do you think it's so important that we start to normalize this?
That's right. Financial well-being is really about having money for today, but having enough for tomorrow so that you can continue to live your life the way you would like. But what I don't hear as much as part of that conversation is what happens if you're not feeling financially well?
Absolutely. So I know a number of Canadians struggle with this and debt in general. So why are we so inclined to not actually talk about it?
One of the things our clients have shared with us is the experience of being in debt is quite isolating. They feel a lot of shame, a lot of guilt. We actually ran some focus groups here in Alberta to understand better that situation. And absolutely, in many cases, they even feel like they've done something criminally wrong, like it's that stigma carrying.
And this is something personally, too, that you've witnessed. You work with an insolvency firm, so you've seen this reaction online. Can you share a little bit about that with us?
Absolutely. I'll share a couple of comments that I've even seen most recently on our Facebook handles. The first one, a wonderful facility for the irresponsible. Right. Spending like there's no tomorrow, and now, oh, poor me, forgive my debts. Because they couldn't live within their means and didn't have the willpower to build up savings. That's just an example of a few I've seen in the last week or so.
So do you find that you have to take it upon yourself to respond to something like that when you're seeing it posted online to try and push back a lot of that stigma?
Yeah, there's no question. We try to reposition it. One of the things that people don't realize is that while mismanagement of your funds can be part of it, more likely than not, debt is often caused by an unexpected external trigger. So some of the things that we see very commonly as part of an external trigger would be things like divorce, job loss, critical illness, even disability, and a death of a spouse. So, oftentimes these kinds of external triggers are so traumatic that, a rainy day fund certainly couldn't carry you through. So when you see a comment like that after you've been through a really difficult external trigger, you can imagine how you might feel shame and stigma.
Do a lot of people recognize, too, that maybe those external triggers are what's causing a lot of the reaction to debt, or is that something that they find out by consulting with somebody like yourself?
I don't think that's something well known. I think intuitively, if we thought about it long enough, we might come to that conclusion. But for the most part, because money is so interwoven into our lives, we sort of just believe, especially if you haven't been in the situation yourself, that debt is a complete result of something that you can control. And many times it is compounded by this external trigger.
And I think that's a big thing, too, is because we want to open up this conversation. So what do we do as a society to start changing the dialogue that surrounds debt in general?
That's a great question, Andrea. Thanks for that. Debt is something today that carries a similar shame and stigma that talking about mental health did about 10 years ago. And we've come a long way in that conversation. And I'd love to see debt come up to that same level of normalization. One of the things is really as a conversation, as Canadians, as Albertans, as a community, money is so interwoven in everything we do. We need to make it okay to discuss, not only when we're being financially well, but when we're struggling, especially when we're struggling, so that we feel safe to reach out for help, to ask for, that support when we need it, rather than sort of struggling and feeling isolated on our own.
Thank you so much for joining us here today, Jasmine. I know that this is just the beginning to carry on that conversation, and hopefully it carries on here for the future.
Absolutely. Thanks, Andrea.
Anytime. All right. If you're looking for a little bit more information, you can head online to bromwich.smith.com for a little bit more information.
Debt Real Talk with Bromwich+Smith. Free confidential debt relief consultations.